What's up, everybody? Good morning. At least it's a good morning for some of us. I spilled a cup of hot coffee directly onto my crotch, so if my face looks upset today, that's why. Here's what you have to look forward to. Me complaining on GoJo and Golic today. Liam Al-Gaib. Liam Coen pulled the old swisheroonie on us. We'll talk about the coaching saga that has finally come to a close, plus Championship Sunday, AFC Championship, NFC Championship. We will break it all down for you, and the All-Stars have been released for the NBA All-Star Game. We will break that one down for you as well. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
Joe and Golic, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield with a lap full of coffee. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Dominique Foxworth going to join the show, the host of the Dominique Foxworth Show, ESPN NFL analyst and former NFL defensive back in the second hour of the show at 9 o'clock. Help us break down the weekend that we got coming up here. Going to be awesome to talk with him. We don't have him on nearly enough, and that's a mistake that I have to own up to when he comes on here. We will get to our preview for both the AFC and NFC Championship games. Incredibly fun Sunday of football that we have coming up here. A rematch, certainly, of an NFC series that we saw get split during the regular season, and a Bills-Chiefs game that we saw the Bills come out on top of in the regular season, which is a theme. The postseason demons they have to slay, a bit of a different story here. And the most bizarre addition to the NFL head coaching cycle yet. But, Jesse, how you feeling? You mentioned it off the top. We got the elephant in the room out of the way here. We watched in the pre-show. Jesse immediately jumped out of her chair in fright. We thought there was some sort of mouse in the room. We thought there was some sort of call she received from home. But no, it was a hot cup of coffee directly in the lap that has now become a cold cup of coffee directly in the lap. So, scale of 1 to 10, Jesse, what's the discomfort level like in the studio right now?
Probably a 12. Probably 12. You know, okay. God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. So I got a lap full of coffee, and I'm gonna have to own it for the rest of the show. I would like to add that I'm wearing yoga pants, so the coffee's sort of tightly, sticking to my body right now. So overall, yes, very uncomfortable. Not a great way to start my Friday.
Wow, that's just...
Yeah.
It's just, especially early in the morning, you're in a routine, and to get thrown out of that routine, can't change, no clothes there to change. They said there might be clothes in the green room, and you're like, men's pair of jeans or something?
Yeah, let me just toss on a men's pair of jeans. Yeah, that'll work.
Just a guy not getting it telling you that.
Yeah. They're like, we think we can help. There's like a sweatshirt down the what? I'll just tie that around take my pants off and tie that around my waist. That'll work, fellas. Yeah, make sure we get that on camera.
This does remind me of the phrase all the time in practice when we'd be going over to have water breaks on hot days in training camp. And you would always see guys going over there and dumping water all over themselves because it's cold and it feels nice. And all of our trainers would understandably be yelling at us to hydrate. And the phrase was always in the tank, not on the tank. And unfortunately, this seems like an in the tank, not on the tank situation for Jesse as well that didn't work out here. So we're going to monitor the situation right now. Jesse's got a big game on Friday here. So she's coming up. She's playing hurt. She's not injured. There's a difference, but still got to acknowledge that playing hurt right now. We appreciate her contributions today, even battling through these circumstances. And the circumstances could not be weirder as we woke up today with some very interesting news in the NFL coaching cycle. Dad, you've been doing this a lot longer than me, so let me know if you've ever seen a coaching cycle that went like the one that we had with Liam Coen, where last time on Dragon Ball Z, Liam Coen, the now former offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2 days ago had rebuffed the efforts of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had pulled himself out of the coaching cycle for that. He had refused an in-person interview and opted to go back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had a deal on the table ready to make him the highest paid coordinator in the NFL. Fast forward to yesterday, all of a sudden, Bucs can't find the guy here. We saw the Jags fired Trent Baalke, their general manager, who had been positioned as someone they didn't want to part with because, in the words of their owner, Shad Khan, it would be organizational suicide to go and have a full overhaul there. It would be shooting themselves in the foot, unless someone really had a problem with it. And it seemed like, Dad, this is as simple as Liam Coen did not want to go and coach the Jacksonville Jaguars if he was going to be saddled with Trent Baalke, someone who a litany of accomplished NFL coaches have had to deal with and not been able to get rid of until now. So the Jags fire Trent Baalke. They call Liam Coen back and ask for a redo. And lo and behold, he ghosts the Tampa Bay Buccaneers all day until finally reaching out to the head coach, Todd Bowles, to tell him that he is taking the Jacksonville job. So, Dad, how unprecedented is this? Have you ever seen a roller coaster ride quite like this?
No, I have not. Not when somebody turned down a job and then was getting ready to or to sign an extension with their original team. Again, he was going to be the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league at about $4.5 million a year. And then, as Mike said, Tampa Bay couldn't find him, didn't hear from him. He ended up eventually telling Todd Bowles what he was going to do. But yeah, this was about Jacksonville. This started with Jacksonville because they didn't fire Trent. And we hate talking about somebody's job, but this is what it is. That Trent Baalke was still there, that he wasn't gone with Doug Peterson. So that's what started this whole situation of teams that didn't want to talk to Jacksonville because they felt they were saddled with a GM that was on the last year of his deal and wasn't doing a very good job. So it's amazing how quickly that changed when they fired him. Liam Coen meets late into the night Thursday evening and ends up agreeing to the deal. So, bottom line is Jacksonville gets a good coach, gets someone from the McVay tree. He was with the Rams for 4 years. He kind of traded off from the Rams and Kentucky because he would go to Kentucky because he wanted autonomy in play calling. You're not getting that with the Rams. McVay's calling the plays. So he wanted. So he bounced back and forth from Kentucky as well to call plays. And he's loved by the Tampa Bay players. So, but with success comes this. This is what happens. It was just a weird situation that looked like Jacksonville blew it because they hung on to a GM that nobody really wanted to work with, and then they get rid of him, and all of a sudden, boom, there you go. The interview happens in person, and the deal is signed.
Yeah, you mentioned his bona fide since becoming the play caller here. Helped Baker Mayfield to a career-best 41 touchdown passes this season. The Buccaneers 28.6 points per game on offense, the third highest in franchise history behind the two good Tom Brady seasons in 2020 and 2021, which is saying a lot. And so he was able to max it out, Dad, but this is yet another example of a, young coordinator who goes and gets a rise to this spot briefly and immediately becomes one of the hot names that gets snatched up here. Now, to your point, lots of familiarity in NFL circles, bouncing back and forth between Kentucky and Los Angeles. Started off in Los Angeles as the third down specialist before he went to Kentucky for that first time around. And remember, coached the best out of Will Levis that we have seen so far in Will Levis's football career, both in college and the NFL, for whatever that's worth to people, especially because it's a different level of football. He was a guy I got to cover, Dad, in 2021 when he was coaching at Kentucky, the offensive coordinator at the helm for that Will Levis-led team. And he was one of the guys, and I'm sure over the years you've seen this too, where you go into a room and you get to talk to a guy for a little bit and you walk out on the other side. And I have had this feeling with two people now in doing these meetings for, 7 years of calling games, which is a drop in the bucket compared to the vast sea of most people. But walking out of the coaching meetings with Marcus Freeman when he was the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati and Liam Coen when he was the offensive coordinator at Kentucky and looked at our crew and said, oh, that guy's going to be a head coach sooner than later. So Liam Coen has trended this way for a while and got the opportunity to coordinate offense last year. And it seemed like checking that box, Dad, was all people really needed, especially for an organization like Jacksonville that is so thirsty to try and get their top overall pick in Trevor Lawrence finally up and running consistently the way they've always believed his ability could.
And, we sit there and talk about work with a quarterback because that's all you talk about with Ben Johnson is work with Caleb Williams, and Liam Coen is work with Baker Mayfield. But you have to understand what Liam did to the running game in Tampa Bay. Before he was just in Tampa Bay a year, and the 2 years previous, Tampa Bay was the worst. The year before Liam got there, Tampa Bay was the worst rushing team in the league at 88 yards a game. This year, they were fourth best at 149 yards a game. So he can help the running game. His big thing is to give the quarterback solutions. And obviously, a big solution is to have a running game that helps your quarterback. But yeah, he helps turn a quarterback or an offense around by helping the running game, which inevitably helps the quarterback as well. Now, we talk about who's going to work with a quarterback if you get a defensive coach. The offensive coordinator is the big hire. Well, this is a guy who's going to call the plays, obviously, for Jacksonville. But you talk about his most important hire, it's quite honestly, Mike, going to be right up your alley. It's going to be an O-line coach because he ain't bringing the Tampa Bay O-line with him. That Tampa Bay O-line was really good. And that O-line in Jacksonville needs to, I think they're set at tackles. They may need some help on the interior, but they need a little bit of work to do on that offensive line. So that's going to be an important hire for Liam Coen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, again, that like all these other hires, especially from coordinator to head coach, we don't really know, but especially with Liam Coen, because the sample size is so small that what he's going to be like as a head coach, which again, like the reasons I thought he might fit well in that, connected very well with his quarterback, did a great job of communicating concepts, all these different things that seem a little bit more prime for the transition than just being a good X's and O's guy or tactician. We'll talk some with Dominique about this coming up off the top of the second hour, because Dominique has long been a proponent for looking for the traits leadership-wise that will lead to good head coaches rather than just focusing on success offensively or defensively. But Dad, the other interesting part of this was a report I saw from Diana Rossini the other day that said what changed for Liam Coen. He got on the plane to Jacksonville after JAGS ownership called him directly and explained that they will let him pick the general manager and would pay him, quote, Ben Johnson level money along with multiple years per sources, which, Dad, it is wild to consider. Again, while I might be confident that Liam Coen will be something as a head coach, to go in immediately after suffering the embarrassment the day before. I mean, think about how hard the tail wagged the dog in this case. Like, yeah, while this worked out and they got their guy, this is a real poor endorsement of the leadership in Jacksonville. And we talked about this yesterday. Shad Khan blowing in the wind saying, well, we want to keep our general manager because we don't want a full-scale overhaul unless someone really disagrees with it. To see that actually play out and them fire their general manager that they supposedly had confidence in, because all of a sudden this guy that's never been a head coach and just barely been an offensive coordinator with play calling duties in the NFL said, yeah, I don't want to deal with him after years of Trent Baalke vanquishing more veteran coaches, is amazing to consider. And again, poor leadership overall. The results may justify this, Dad, but their process is FUBAR, bleeped beyond all recognition.
Oh, without question. And the normal way is a general manager and management team help pick a coach. They're letting Liam Coen pick the GM. I mean, this is kind of the reverse product of what you're going to do. I mean, I guess it hasn't been the norm for a while, but normally it hasn't been the norm in bad teams. The structure is flawed, and the structure in Jacksonville is flawed without question. So Liam's gonna bring in the new general manager, who obviously he's gonna bring in someone that he can work with. And at the end of the day, as long as you have a good working relationship, that's what you want. You know, whoever has final say on roster. I mean, they're giving Liam a whole bunch of power. He's 39 years old. Ben Johnson money is about, I think, 6th or 7th in the league as far as where you rank. It's about $13 million a year. So in the matter of a day, he was going to sign a deal that made him $4.5 million as the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league to $13 million as a first-time head coach at 39 years old. So, and you're right. Just this started with bad structure in Jacksonville. And by the way, that's what Liam Coen is going into. He's going into bad management structure in Jacksonville. So let's see what happens. It's a team that's been kind of middling, been good enough to make the playoffs. You saw signs, but then been bad as well. They can't seem to find any consistency. Let's see if he can help bring some.
Well, Dad, you mentioned their most important hire maybe being in the offensive line room. I would say it's got to be the general manager. Now, you have lifted the Trent Baalke-sized scapegoat off your organization, and I don't say scapegoat as if it was, misaligned blame for what had gone on there. Trent Baalke's got a storied history of not living up to expectations and yet somehow retaining jobs at stops in San Francisco and in Jacksonville, despite an underwhelming product where usually everyone else gets blamed. Now he's taken out of the equation here, but that still means that, hey, if you go, listen, the Cowboys are about to find out, unless you've got a replacement that you know is going to come in and do a better job, you're also wading into different waters here. And so that hire and being in line there so you could try and resist management and, do your best to insulate the product from Shad Khan and his influence on this, which right now seems to be someone that got so embarrassed, Dad, that they decided to just spend their way through this. Like, all of the hires from here on out in Jacksonville become really interesting because this was clearly an owner who is, listen, rich like the rest of these guys all are, has an ego a mile wide, I'm sure, like the rest of these guys, and felt embarrassed about how this was playing out publicly for his organization. The win now becomes Liam Coen, at least with what we know, and the ties to the organization and the coaching tree that's been one of the most prolific in the NFL at this point in time, should bring an upgrade, especially offensively, to a team that desperately needs that. But there are so many other questions that have to get answered. Just a wild saga, and one that I'm sure, God, if you're a minority head coaching candidate watching this, has to be beyond frustrating to see not only a guy just go into play calling for 1 year, have a modicum of success, and immediately become the belle of the ball, but have an organization literally burn down everything around them just to make him feel accommodated. Has to be somewhat maddening here, but unfortunately, especially when someone is connected to the offensive side of the football, Dad, that's what we've seen happen time and time again. This is what people thought might happen for Bobby Slowick after year one in Houston with how well that went down there. Zach Robinson's a guy in Atlanta that a lot of people loved up after year one, going and coordinating that offense through the change with Kirk Cousins. And now Liam Coen represents sort of the final boss of this new wave of young offensive minds that are already getting these opportunities in the NFL to be head coaches.
Yeah, and just another one from the Sean McVay tree, right? The guy's got hell of a branches from a tree for being so young. Sean McVay, we know, started young as a 30-year-old head coach, but his tree and branches have grown pretty mighty over the years with guys that have coordinated under him, don't call plays under him, yet go out and get head coaching jobs elsewhere. And certainly, like anything else, some have succeeded, some have failed. But it's an amazing tree that Sean McVay has grown. You would think he was a 40-year vet.
Certainly conducts himself in that way, and that has netted a lot of people pretty positive results so far. By the way, while all of this is going on, I can't imagine how, maybe I can't decide anymore, Dad, if this is what he would want or if this makes him angry, because we also got the report in the midst of all of this, and we could talk about this in a little bit, that the Cowboys are approaching the finish line and getting ready to hire Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach. Yep. No later than Friday was the report from Clarence Hill. But, Dad, Jerry Jones, who courts chaos, who courts attention more than anyone else, I can't decide if this is exactly how he wanted it, to be able to lead with Deion Sanders and then slip in Brian Schottenheimer all under the cover of what's going on with Liam Coen, or if he is going to throw some last-ditch wrench into the equation just to try and steal the attention back from the Jaguars.
Yeah, we know Jerry loves the attention, but I don't think he's going to steal the attention here. I think he's going to elevate Brian Schottenheimer, a guy who's been a coordinator with the Jets, the Rams, actually Georgia, Jacksonville, and with Dallas. So with Dallas, again, didn't call the plays. Mike McCarthy called the plays. But yeah, I think it's just going to be kind of an under-the-radar hire.
And most importantly, won't threaten Jerry Jones's ability to wield power or get credit for what happens, which checks the two most important boxes of being a Cowboys head coaching hire. Coming up next, let's look at championship weekend in the NFL. Chiefs, Bills, Eagles, Commanders, all angles decided next.
AFC Championship is just a few sleeps away, and it's almost like we've had this dream before. It's the Chiefs, it's the Bills, it's Mahomes, it's Josh Allen, and we know how this one's played out in the past, so we got to discuss this, see if we think it's going to continue in the trend of the Chiefs. But Allen is up for MVP. Sean McDermott is up for Coach of the Year. But one Bills lineman had us a thought on how to make the unusual usual. Listen to this.
Offensive linemen don't have awards for being great. There's not a Protector of the Year award. I'm knocking at so many doors now to get this award going. And I'm going to head spirit and make sure that this gets done before I'm done playing, because there's so many greats. There's so many greats. And if we have great quarterbacks, we have great running backs, we have rushing titles, we have quarterback passing titles, all those titles are reflections of the old linemen, which are the protectors.
Oh, GoJo, it's music to your ears, right? Deion Dawkins there with a great proposal.
I mean, listen, I feel like we have been ahead of the curve on this, handing out the Campbell's Chunky Offensive Lineman of the Week around here on the show. So, Deion Dawkins, we support the cause. I work on the Joe Moore Award in college, which goes to the best unit, which could be another way to potentially reframe this and do it that way. But if we want to dole out an individual honor, Dad, I think it has long since been time for Zach Martin and Trent Williams to get the recognition that they deserve.
This is an easy one to know why they don't. Because voters are people who have no clue what they're looking at when they look at the offensive line. When you vote for the Joe Moore Award, it's a bunch of old linemen, right? It's a bunch of former offensive linemen who are voting for the award. You guys know what the hell you're looking at. You know, these voters can see stats of running backs and sacks and catches and passing yards, and they can vote on that. They have no clue what they're looking at when they're watching an offensive line. So that's why they wouldn't embarrass themselves by, A, the O-line, it lives in a world of anonymity, and B, they would have no idea how to vote for the best protector. And obviously, there are next-gen stats now that you use of pressures you give up and sacks you give up, and they could use that as stats. But you got to watch an O-line to understand an O-line and understand the game of the offensive line.
Listen, I think we are in a day and age where we are finally ready for this as a society. There is renewed interest in the position of offensive line. More people are trying to learn it. You head this up with Brandon Thorne, who has this trench warfare newsletter. It's one of the best in the NFL at breaking down this position, breaking down what goes on in the trenches. You put him in charge of that. You have a bunch of other former players fall in line with this, and we prosper and we give the big boys the recognition that they deserve. Upon this rock, we will build our church. I believe we are finally ready for this as a society. And Dad, I believe we're finally ready for this game. The question is, do you think the Buffalo Bills are ready to slay their postseason dragon that has been the Kansas City Chiefs?
Listen, they're the better team. But again, we know that doesn't mean anything when you have Pat Mahomes. This is a ninth meeting between Mahomes and Allen. They're actually 4-4, 4 wins each, 4 losses each. But the more important stat is Pat is 3-0 against Josh in the postseason. Bills, like they have in the past, won the regular season 30-21 in Week 11. And they really did it by controlling the clock in the game. They held the ball for over 9 minutes more than Kansas City, though we know Kansas City normally doesn't need much time to score, i.e. see the overtime of their playoff game a few years ago. They like I said, held the ball for like 9 minutes more, had 71 plays Buffalo had 71 plays to Kansas City's 52 plays. Now, they didn't run for a lot of yards. They had 31 carries for a little over 100 yards. But again, they ran the ball. They controlled the clock. And Buffalo was running the ball well in the postseason. Again, against Denver, the third best team against the run, 120 yards, 147 yards against the best run defense team in Baltimore. So they're running the ball well. If they can continue to do that, control the ball, control the clock, control Josh Allen to some play action and some Josh Allen runs, I mean, they're the better team. They've given up yards passing, though for Kansas City, especially in the playoffs, the wide receivers barely scratched the surface of catches in the playoffs. It was Travis Kelce, who had 117 yards. He averaged 56 yards a game in the regular season, had 117. Shows you what maybe a little bit of rest would do. He had like 3 weeks off, and so what rest will do for you. So that could be Buffalo's pass defense hasn't been the best. But again, their offense, Mike, in the two different games we're playing, Kansas City has given up 41 sacks. Washington has given up 50 sacks. Philly has given up 45 sacks. Buffalo has given up 14 sacks. They're number one in the league. They protect Josh Allen. Now, that has to do with Josh Allen as well. So Josh Allen is clean in the pocket. He's a devastating runner. James Cook is running the ball well. Between they and Philly, it's the best O-line left in the playoffs. Everything stacks up for Buffalo. except the past, of which they haven't beat. Josh Allen hasn't beaten Pat Mahomes in the postseason.
How much does that How much does that matter, though, under the weight of what this current team is going through? The mental portion of that with the Buffalo Bills against this opponent in particular, against the Kansas City Chiefs team, who, Dad, there aren't a lot of football reasons this year, as you mentioned, although we can get into some. Like, I think the Chiefs and the quick passing attack against Buffalo could certainly be something that they've leaned into down the stretch of the season as they've had the O-line shuffled around, Joe Tooney out there, Hollywood Brown back in the lineup. All of those things have helped them offset maybe a more inconsistent run game than we've seen in the past, and certainly the lack of a viable downfield passing attack. But like you said, on paper, most of the rest of this goes to Buffalo. So how much is that mental hurdle worth?
Well, again, if Kansas City is up, Buffalo is down in the game, there's a point in the game where Buffalo tries to fight through, but you get that feeling of, here we go again. We can beat them in the regular season. We can't beat them in the playoffs. Now, you'd certainly not like to have that feeling, but you're a human being. Buffalo knows they haven't beaten Mahomes in the Josh Allen era in the playoffs. So if you again, they're the better team, but if all of a sudden there's mistakes being made, they're down in the game, there's going to be a lot of head scratching of like, my God, why can we do it in the regular season, but we can't do it in the postseason? But again, they're the better team on paper. I just like the matchups, like a Chris Jones matchups against the interior of that Buffalo line. Now, Chris Jones only had 5 sacks during the regular season, but he had 60 pressure or 62 pass rush wins, 50 pressures. That's the most of any D tackle in the league. So that's why stats can be a misleading stat, or sacks can be a misleading stat sometime about the number you get, as opposed to the pressure you put on a quarterback to force a bad throw or possibly an interception.
Yeah, I think point well served. I think I saw Cam Jordan actually come out with that, the star pass rusher for the Saints, say sacks are an overrated stat just for that reason. It doesn't fully measure the impact that a player can have down in and down out. And Chris Jones, remember, was coming back off a calf injury. We saw him on the sideline of that divisional round game getting that calf buffed out. So certainly not 100%, it seems. And, Dad, you're going to need that and then some, because Buffalo, the game plan is very simple. We're going to put 6 offensive linemen on the field, and we're going to try and wear you out. And they just did that against 2 of the top 3 rush defenses in the NFL. And now Kansas City, who, listen, the one weapon they've got on their side is Steve Spagnuolo is the best designer of bespoke postseason game plans that we've probably had in NFL history, or at least modern NFL history, on defense. He always seems to have some sort of an answer for them, and they've done a good job this season. They blitzed Josh Allen well during the regular season, although it didn't amount to as much as they wanted. And overall, this has been a team that's been so prolific using the blitz in the NFL at really high rates, not as high as, a team like the Detroit Lions or the Minnesota Vikings, but still up there, I think 5th highest in the NFL. It's going to have to be clean shots like that. And, Dad, you're going to have to do the thing that no one has been able to do with Josh Allen so far this year and force him into mistakes. That's the part where I start to get hung up with the Chiefs, is in the last round against Baltimore. Buffalo went there and Baltimore made the mistakes. They had the turnovers. They had the drops at the end of the games. They were the ones who flinched in a game where, Dad, I think most people would say, especially in the second half of that, Baltimore looked like the better team, sans the turnovers. We know the story about how everyone who lost in that last round got outgained the winning team, but most lost the turnover margin outside of the Houston Texans. And so with Buffalo, you can't count on Kansas City making mistakes at this point. That's going to be the key, is Kansas City is so comfortable here, the Arrowhead Invitational, all these things that we always say. And all season long, it's been, hey, they're not as prolific, but they don't flinch in big moments. Critical third downs, late game execution, all these areas where other teams, especially a Bills team that has not gotten over that hump yet in this postseason, tend to fall short. So you can't count on them making mistakes on the other side the way you were able to with Baltimore.
It's like the Bill Belichick method of play clean football and let the other team beat itself. Let the other team make 100%. A mistake. But now the one of the biggest differences is Josh Allen isn't making the mistakes. He doesn't have. It used to be the turn. You cross your fingers of he wouldn't turn the ball over, especially in the red zone. He has had no interceptions in the postseason. He only had 6 in the regular season. 1 was against Kansas City. Kansas City blitzed the Bills at the 3rd highest rate when they played during the regular season, and Josh Allen completed 8 of 16 for 108 yards, a touchdown, and one of his 6 interceptions on the regular season. And as you mentioned, Spagnuolo is going to blitz. There's no doubt about that. But I think one of the biggest differences for Buffalo is they haven't made the mistakes. Josh Allen hasn't turned the ball over. They haven't beaten themselves. It was actually Baltimore, who we all thought had the better team on paper when they played Buffalo. Baltimore was the one that made the mistakes, and Buffalo forced some mistakes. Buffalo hasn't been making the mistakes. And if they play a clean game, they're going to be a tough team to beat.
All right, so you picking them to win?
I think I am. I mean, I think I am. I think mainly because Josh Allen does not have the propensity to turn the ball over. And they're running the ball so well. They bring in Alec Anderson, that extra O-lineman. He's talked about as much as Dan Skipper has talked about, the extra O-lineman for Detroit. But they run the jumbo package of 6 O-linemen more than any team in the league. They get behind them, and they just run. And I talked about that with Baltimore, basically doing that with an extra lineman and Patrick Ricard, a 300-pound fullback, and running Derrick Henry. But again, it was Buffalo with their 6 linemen and just playing smash mouth and succeeding against 2 of the top rush defenses in the NFL. So I figured that's going to be the same. Now, it doesn't seem like weather is going to be an issue. So I think they're going to try and power it up and just try and run over Kansas City.
I agree. They are going to try and do that, and all of the points that you made are very well served. Chiefs 24, Bills 23. I don't know how it comes about here. Like I said, I'm going to be interested. The matchup I am most interested is watching how the Buffalo Bills edge rushers do against now Joe Thuney, who has moved out to left tackle. They had DJ Humphries healthy in the last round, and they elected to keep Joe Thuney out there at guard. And so this is a pass rush. He was not at tackle during this matchup earlier in the season. And so now with the way that the Chiefs have morphed themselves around that with Joe Thuney, how does that affect against AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseau, who especially Greg Rousseau has had probably his best season as a pro, done a great job generating pressure for this team. We've talked earlier in the season about how he was probably underrated as an edge rusher for a lot of this year. That's the area where you've been able to get over on this Chiefs team here. I think, Taron Johnson being a little bit banged up coming off the last game here, especially with how Travis Kelce operated in the box and was able to work the middle of the field. All those things just allow the Chiefs that little bit of wiggle room that they need to go out here and, like they've done all season, find wins in ways that we don't quite fully understand, but that all seem to pop up. So I know that right now this game's essentially a pick 'em. The Chiefs are 1.5-point favorites at home. I'll say Buffalo covers that one, Dad, but I think that's about all I'm willing to give them.
I'm going Buffalo 27-20. I mean, the Buffalo defense showed up well against Baltimore, and Buffalo and Baltimore were 2 of the top scoring offenses in the league. And that Buffalo defense showed up. Now, they are nicked up a little bit, and again, against the pass can be questionable. But again, Kansas City's receivers didn't do much in the first game. It was Travis Kelce that did all the damage. So I think they finally shake the postseason demons, and Buffalo Bills, which again I think is the better team, is going to move on to the Super Bowl.
Would be huge there. Faith is believing without seeing, and so the faith in the Buffalo Bills from my father. As we wrap up the AFC Championship matchup and move on, coming up next, a rematch of a conference and a divisional rivalry between the Eagles and the Commanders.
So we just broke down the AFC Championship. Now let's get into the NFC Championship. It's an all NFC East showdown, okay? Commanders, Eagles, a trip to the Super Bowl on the line here. A lot's been said about the mobile quarterback, slides, big hits on these dual threats, and Commanders DC had some interesting words regarding the mobility of his opponent. Listen to Joe Way here.
We've had a number of these guys that we've had to prepare for, and so the one thing is if he's going to run the ball, and if the coordinator makes a decision for him to run the ball, we're going to treat him like a running back, and we're going to hit him that way, So that's their decision if they want to get him hit the way that he gets hit. If they don't, they'll keep him in the pocket. So.
Well.
it sounds great when you say it, but Dad, I'm pretty sure anyone who's ever approached a game against a mobile quarterback has thought the same thing. And, results may vary on this. Now, the thing that might help them, Jalen Hurts nursing a left knee injury that he sustained late in the game last week. But other than that, this is, I'm sure you've been in plenty of defensive meeting rooms where this has been a line item on our goals for the game.
Well, I mean, it's like you hit the quarterback and drive him into the ground. The unfortunate part is you can't hit the quarterback the way we used to be able to hit the quarterback, i.e. see Pat Mahomes. But again, will Jalen Hurts get the calls? Will Jaden Daniels get the calls? We'll see. And again, they treat the quarterback differently, especially if he tries to slide feet first. That's the one, or if they try and dance before going out of bounds. So it's something even former quarterbacks who are now analysts complain about, that the quarterbacks are getting away with. But it is what you do. When a quarterback runs, I mean, that's the natural. This isn't rocket science. You treat him like a running back, and you hit him like a running back. You hit him hard. You gang tackle him. You drive him into the ground. That's the game. And if they get up, they get up. If they don't, and you hit them cleanly, that's part of the game. So, and remember, in this second game when Washington won 36-33, Jalen Hurts was concussed in the first quarter. This was a Kenny Pickett game. This was a game where the Eagles scored 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. Ended up with a 21-14 to lead at halftime. Kenny Pickett, again, was the quarterback from somewhat of the first quarter on. In the second half, they couldn't put it in the end zone. They had 4 scoring opportunities. They had 4 field goals, where Washington put it in the end zone every time in the fourth quarter with 3 touchdowns. And they get the 36-33 win. So it was the inability for the Eagles to put it in the end zone. Jalen Hurts being out, of which he's back now. So that obviously is a monster difference in the game. I think, Mike, one of the big differences in this game is that Aaron Glenn, the defense coordinator for Detroit, when Washington played Detroit, we know they had to blitz. Their blitz package picked up when Aiden Hutchinson went out. Philadelphia does not blitz much. They are not a big blitzing team. They get it with the front 4. They have a hell of a back 7, led by those 2 rookie corners and Bond, the linebacker. They don't have to blitz as much. I think they were the 4th fewest as far as blitz. So that already is a big difference in this game.
Yeah, it's a major feather in the cap for Philadelphia that don't have to expose themselves to what you could argue is the best part of Jaden Daniels' game right now. He has been one of the best rookie quarterbacks of all time, shredding against the blitz, and we saw that on full display last week. And Dad, the Commanders are really the team that sort of bucks the trend in this postseason of groups that are more defined by their offensive line, a more conservative game plan style than Washington, who wants to go bombs away on you, throw deep passes, and give their players opportunities. De'Ami Brown's had a phenomenal postseason run. Terry McLaurin obviously comes with a well-worn reputation, but those were the guys that still, in the last matchup against Philadelphia, did go off, did have great days, and did challenge these quarterbacks on the outside, Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay on the edges for the Eagles. So they proved they could still get over on them, but the difference is on the other side, you had Kenny Pickett, Pickett, going in there, turning the ball over early on, giving them opportunities in the red zone, making the uncharacteristic mistakes that Jalen Hurts at least has been less inclined to make this season with Kellen Moore and company at the helm. So the question really becomes for me, Dad, on the Eagles side offensively, how much are they going to be comfortable involving Jalen Hurts in the game plan? I thought coming out last week and getting him involved early, their first touchdown came on a play where Jalen Hurts was the design rusher. And while he's never been a dynamic athlete, he's tough, he's a good runner, he's used plenty in that area. And so will the Eagles have that threat to be able to show them in order to try and hold the backside and help the rest of that run game? Because Saquon Barkley is a beneficiary of that. They've got a great offensive line. They're going to have plenty of opportunities against a front 7 for them that's beat up. Deron Payne's been nursing an injury. Frankie Louvu been questionable going into this game with an injury. So they're going to have opportunities to beat them up in the box, but Jalen Hurts' legs go a long way in aiding that.
Yeah, and I was surprised in calling the Buffalo-Baltimore game that because in calling the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, Lamar Jackson was involved in a lot of design runs. In the Buffalo game, he was not. And that kind of surprised me a little bit. So it will be interesting how much Jalen Hurts will be involved in the design run game. Because, again, you can leave it in the hands of Saquon Barkley, just like we thought you could leave it in the hands of Derrick Henry in the game against Buffalo. In the 2 games against Washington, Saquon Barkley had 54 carries for 296 yards and 4 touchdowns. And throw a couple of receptions in there in the first game for 52 yards. I mean, the dude is just a one-man wrecking crew, again, behind a great offensive line. But your point is well taken. How much do there's basically 2 games left. You have to empty the tank here. You're going to have to run Jalen Hurts if depending on obviously on the game situations, but you have to make him a running threat, I believe.
You do, but I just don't know how effective he's going to be. We saw last year how much having a knee injury limited his effectiveness as a rusher. And so you can have him out there, but the defense is only going to believe it so often as it works. And I just don't know how often, A, you want to put him in harm's way with that, but B, how comfortable Jalen's going to be taking off and being as effective in those areas. Again, as a guy who is more a tough runner than he is an elusive runner, that to me becomes a concern for the Eagles offense, even if I still ultimately believe that offensive line is enough against the front 7 of Washington to be able to go get it done. Give it the Commanders credit in the second half of that game you talked about in the latest one they won against the Kenny Pickett-led Eagles. Washington's defense did step up, set edges better, do the things necessary to stop the run. Dad, I just don't think it's going to happen here. Now, Washington can keep themselves in the game because, again, they can go deep, and Jaden Daniels has been able to take off, use his legs. I thought that was when things changed for Washington in that last game as well, when between scrambling and designed rushes, they started to involve Jaden Daniels a lot more, who, south of Lamar Jackson, Dad, probably the most athletic quarterback in the NFL, and certainly one of the most fearsome rushers in terms of what opposing defenses have to worry about.
Yeah, he's a dangerous runner. He was actually the leading rusher for Washington in that 36-33 win in December. 9 carries for 81 yards, averaged 9 yards a carry, had a long of right around 30 yards. He is a danger. Where Jalen Hurts can be an effective runner with the gimpy knee, I think he still can be effective runner. Jaden Daniels is a dangerous runner. I mean, he can actually put a move on you. He can take it to the house. Based off of that second game, everybody thinks, boy, plus Washington can score points. But this Philadelphia defense, and I know they gave up 33 in December against Washington. That was what Jaden Daniels threw 5 touchdown passes in that game. Had 2 interceptions, but threw 5 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels has been nothing short of just fantastic his rookie year. But I just think this Eagles team is too good overall. Getting Jalen Hurts back, the defense is playing well. They haven't gone through the injury bug that they went through last year. They obviously Nakobe Dean is going to be out, but Zach Bond has really filled the linebacking spot well. They hit gold on the 2 rookie. DeJean and Mitchell, the 2 rookie secondary guys. And Jalen Carter is an absolute menace up front, an absolute menace.
Yeah, and he's been sensational in this playoff run, and that's the biggest concern I have for Washington, because you talk about critical offensive line injuries on both sides. For Washington, Sam Cosmi, one of their former draft picks at tackle, who's been starring at guard for them now, out with an ACL injury after that last round. So one of the guys that would have been tasked with stopping Jalen Carter, now all of a sudden you introduce a backup into that equation, and that's certainly advantaged Philadelphia on the defensive front. But Dad, on the other side, Philadelphia not without blemish. Cam Jurgens didn't practice on Thursday, dealing with a back injury that might have also been the reason why we saw a bit of an uncharacteristic game from him last week. Dallas Goedert also out in that practice Thursday, dealing with an ankle injury. So everyone's banged up at this time of year. We understand that. But for Philadelphia, Cam Jurgens at the center of that offensive line has been a massive story for them this season. And so if he either is close to not going or goes back out there, and I mean, you know how this is, and certainly I know how this is, dealing with a back injury at that position against the guys you'll see on the interior of that Washington defensive front, that's a tall order, and he's a guy that's asked with a lot in front of Jalen Hurts and would no doubt be something where Washington could find an advantage as well. Maybe not as big as the one on the other side. Again, Cosmi out against Jalen Carter, to me, is the red flag, wave your hands, hey, we got trouble over here, but Cam Jurgens certainly concerning news.
Another thing that Washington kind of turned around in the postseason in the 2 games was turnovers. Now, defensively, they just forced 17 turnovers in the regular season. That's not a lot. In 2 games in the postseason, they have 6. Now, 5 came against Detroit. But they have 6 total, 1 against Tampa, 5 against Detroit. They turned 3 of those 6 turnovers into touchdowns, so they're getting points on them. But can they turn Philadelphia over? They weren't able to do it much in the regular season. Again, just 17 in 17 games. Again, that's not a lot. But they were able to do it in the postseason. If you can turn a team over, obviously in the postseason, it means an awful lot.
Yeah, in that regard on the back end for Washington, and we saw this in the last matchup, Marshawn Lattimore saw a lot of A.J. Brown, a lot of flags drawn in that game. He certainly was following him around and harassing him, and he's going to have to be one of the guys charged with trying to make that happen for them. Let's make this Cash It or Trash It. Cash It or Trash It is presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours as we look ahead to this matchup and try and pick a game where, unlike the other game, Dad, between Buffalo and Kansas City, the Philadelphia Eagles almost a touchdown favorite in this game, 6-point favorites at home. The over-under set at 47.5 in this game. Who do you like, and why ultimately do they win?
Well, I think, and the weather's supposed to be nice. On Sunday, it says a high of 39, a low of 26, cloudy, but no snow. So they won't play in a snow globe game like they did last week. I think Philly, I'm just going with the basics here, I think is the better team all around, from offensive line to running back to defense. And I think they get the win. If Jalen Hurts can be now that's going to be a key with the balky knee. How effective he can be. How much does it have to turn into a passing game of, oh, by the way, they have pretty good receivers out there, but we know it's been a Saquon Barkley year with the running attack behind that great offensive line. Both teams have given up sacks. Washington has given up 50 sacks. Philly has given up 45 sacks. So watch the quarterbacks have to kind of scramble to run, and there will probably be some sacks in this game. But I like Philly in this game. I'll give Washington the benefit of the doubt to keep it under the points given, because Washington can score points. They can score, and they can score quickly. They can score on a deep strike. Jaden Daniels is just absolutely an incredible young quarterback who should have a long, incredibly productive career. But I just think overall Philly is too good. I think at the end of the day, the smash mouth football that they can play with Saquon Barkley and some of Jalen Hurts will be ultimately too much for Washington controlling the ball. So I'm going to say Philadelphia 24-20. So I think Washington does cover. Maybe I'll go 27-24. It'll be a little more high scoring. 27. I think I said that for both games. Just make it easy for both games.
There you go. Easy so you can remember it. Well, you stole my score. 27-24 was going to be my pick as well. For the same reason, I think Washington going out here against an Eagles defense that's not going to blitz them a ton still was able to have success downfield. I think the receivers and the quarterback are that good when it comes to deep ball proficiency. But like you said, sort of in the other matchup, the same way where, hey, this isn't going to be the same deal. They're not going to just blitz the house against Jaden and let him pick that apart every play. And conversely, I don't think they're going to put the ball in harm's way as much as Detroit had to in a game where the script got out of whack and they had to throw themselves back in it as much. I think Philadelphia can ground and pound their way out of this. I think they can protect Jalen Hurts enough. And I think we can move on and get what I would predict right now based on my picks, a rematch of the Super Bowl from 2 years ago between the Eagles and Chiefs taking center stage. Coming up next, we will see if Dominique Foxworth agrees with any of our dumbass takes. Next, Jesse Cofield still dealing with a lap full of coffee here, battling, persevering, finding a way. To help us now, we bring in one of our favorite teammates, someone we won't have around here nearly often enough, but officially friend of the program. We remedied that last time he was here. ESPN NFL analyst and host of the Dominique Foxworth Show, Dominique Foxworth. Morning, buddy. How you doing?
Hey, Eric Adams fits in that category of people we were talking about during the break. You don't have to share it with the audience if you don't want to, but I was just looking at pictures, and Eric Adams, I don't trust him.
Well, I know I will bring people into this during the break here because we'll talk football eventually, but that's not nearly as important as the discussion we had in the break that stemmed from Dominique Foxworth rocking a goatee. And I said, I think that's a facial hairstyle that I find disagreeable on white men, but awesome on black men. And it got to Dominique's take that he believes that people without facial hair are untrustworthy.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, not completely untrustworthy, but like, if you're not in the military, like, and you just shaved it all off, I got some questions. Like, you have something. You have a little, like, if it's not required by your job, like you play for the Yankees, cool, shave it off. But if you're a regular dude, well, keep the follicles around, a little something.
Got to have a little scratch there, right? Yeah. I'm glad I didn't shave before the show. Then you'd have thought worse of me.
I don't think I've ever seen you like fully shaven, or it feels like I haven't in forever.
Oh, well, it hasn't been since the pandemic. Dominique, I kid you not. Yep. My father, for the first 30 years of my life, never wore facial hair. He always had a naked face. And then during the pandemic, he grew out the gray beard. And now all of a sudden, I look at old pictures and I genuinely feel like we failed my dad by letting him walk out the house with that naked ass face.
Well, the reason why, I mean, listen, when unfortunately when I had a shaved face, I was also fat, and I had like 4 chins, and it didn't look good.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinner, but the facial hair even covers up, anything in the neck. So I feel good about it. But yeah, I was a bit thick boned back then.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Golic kind of doctored up my assessment a little bit about the facial hair. Golic Jr., that is. It's like, I mean, I don't know. It's the whites with or without facial hair. Like, I don't know. I haven't thought much about it. Like, it was just like coming up. It was like black men with no facial hair. Yeah, I was a little concerned about it because they were making a statement. I think it's just about conformity. It's like, I'm unwilling to conform. It's something about that made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay, that is a good addendum to all this. So just know, black men without facial hair, Dominique Foxworth's got his eye on you. He's not saying fully out, but
yeah.
definitely
but
saying there's something that's concerning.
You got some questionable ideologies, maybe. I mean, you just look at the ones who run and win. Like, naked faces.
Exactly, Dominique, because they got to be glad that you can't see their likes anymore on Twitter, because I'm sure they'd be concerning. So now that we have ironed out that take officially, okay. I guess we can talk some football. Mostly, Dominique, I want to start with the weird coaching hire that we just had, the Liam Coen stuff here. You are someone who I've always appreciated your takes on NFL head coaching, because you've talked about the void and looking at leadership traits and all these things as opposed to just X and O success. Now you got a guy in Liam Coen who had 1 year being an offensive play caller, who the Jags basically burned down everything for. Have you ever seen anything like this? And ultimately, what does this say about the Jags as an organization?
Yeah, I'm getting old enough now that I feel like I can't say there are too many things that I haven't seen anything like it before, but we've seen it. And I guess times when it's worked is like Sean McVay is a time where it was like a surprising hire out of nowhere, younger guy with very limited experience that has worked. I think Brandon Staley comes to mind also as a time when they had a out of nowhere, less than experienced hire that ended up not working out. And you can make that same argument for Ben Johnson. It's like his experience is not deep. There was a time when the coordinators had to have a long stretch. I guess the generally we don't know. It's hard to know because the skills that I think are most important to be a successful head coach aren't really tested, and it's no way for us to understand on the outside. But we often hire guys based on how well they coordinated an offense, and that's not what your job is. You have to kind of do a bunch of other things. And I might want to roll out this brand new take that I've been thinking about that I haven't debuted anywhere else, but not even on my own show. But defensive coaches are more prepared to be head coaches, because I think head coaching a team is more about the interpersonal dynamics and attitude and developing culture, and a lot more than X's and O's. Whereas I think the offensive coaches, they see a problem and they think they can scheme their way out of it. Defensive coaches, before we go to scheme, the first thing is toughness. We're going to tough our way out of everything, which I know sounds dumb, but when you are talking about developing a culture and galvanizing around some sort of identity, defense that's all what we're all about. We only got like 5 coverages, and all the blitzes we've done, everyone's seen them before. And when stuff's not working out, do it harder. That feels feels stupid, but it's right.
No, I agree. Listen to a defensive play call, listen to an offensive play call. One lasts 5 minutes, the other lasts 5 seconds. And the defensive play call lasts 5 seconds. And you're right. Anytime an offensive coach is hired, it's all about what are they going to do for the quarterback. When a defensive coach is hired, it's like, well, how are they going to change the culture of the team? So overall, you are correct. So Liam Coen, an offensive guy, goes to Jacksonville to try and help that offense and help that team. But also there's another thing that old school, Dominique, has been GM is hired first, GM helps look for the coach. Well, there's no GM in Jacksonville. Liam Cohen's going to be part of the search. The Jets have a coach in Aaron Glenn. There's no GM there. Is this just a new way? Does it not matter? Or is this just bad organizational skills by these teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing between a GM and a coach is that they're aligned. And so I'm not sure that it matters who's there first, but it does, I think, help decide who has the leverage and the power in that conversation. And which honestly, I don't hate the idea that it's the head coach. Like the head coach is going to be essentially overseeing all the strategy and scheme and preparation. So like he should have some influence in the groceries, to invoke the old cliche about developing the team. So I guess it's one way to, I guess Howie Roseman in Philly seems like the most like baseball of all NFL situations, where it's pretty clear that the GM is making the decisions and it's been effective. And then the decisions after that kind of trickle down out of him. So I'm not sure that it matters. I'd be more upset if the organization hired a GM and a coach like separately. It doesn't matter the order, but guys that aren't aligned in any way, and then slammed them together and said, figure it out. Because then that to me leads to, there's no clear hierarchy. There's fighting and confusion, there's finger pointing, and then it comes, who's going to get fired comes down to who has the best relationship with the owner, not whose vision I think is more productive.
Well, speaking of clear hierarchy, no clearer hierarchy in sports than the Dallas Cowboys, where Jerry Jones is in charge and wants all the credit, and the coach will fall in line with that. It sounds like they're going to hire Brian Schottenheimer at some point today. Is this the most Cowboys move possible, Dominique, to lead with Deion Sanders and wind up with Brian Schottenheimer?
I got a question, and I'm going to whisper it because it sounds kind of ridiculous. Is Jerry Jones broke? He talked about how they were going to go all in and then spent no money in free agency. Every time there's a player that needs an extension, he waits until the last second. In this situation, there's so many coaches, and we talk about, Troy Aikman says that it's not a desirable job, but maybe he's right compared to other jobs. But I'm pretty sure there's some pretty high profile coaches or coach candidates that will be happy to take on the challenge of the Dallas Cowboys. And I guess the reason why he didn't stick with Mike McCarthy, we're not sure exactly the true reason why. I'm just presenting it because it seems like some broke-ass behavior. It's like a track record of some broke-ass behavior from him, which is like maybe he's cheap, but we never thought of him as cheap before, right? So it's either you're cheap or you're broke the way you're acting, and I think he might be broke.
He's displaying.
Crazy, right?
You're right. We don't have the eyes on his bank account, but this is broke boy behavior, Dad, right? To go out here and proceed with business like you're the Las Vegas Police. Like, we know Mark Davis doesn't have money, but in this case, we're a little shocked by Jerry Jones' behavior.
This is some Bengals ass activity that's happening down in Dallas.
Boy, that would be something. That would be something if they became non-spenders. We know he normally pays, but he pays late. So it'd be interesting. Paying Brian Schottenheimer a lot less than he would pay Deion Sanders, that's for sure. All right, let's look at the playoff games. Overall, generally, Buffalo played Kansas City in the regular season. Obviously, it's a division with Philadelphia and Washington. Is it less about game planning and more just, I know it's always about execution, but you know these teams. You may throw in a wrinkle or two here, but you really know these teams, and it's not like you're going to out-game plan the other.
Yeah, I mean, you never really, the major games, there is some advantages that you create about game planning, but when they're really good teams at the end, we've already seen all of your best moves, and especially for the the Chiefs, like they've been in these big moments so many times. I think it's hard for them to surprise people. I will give Spagnuolo a ton of credit. What he does kind of every game, and I think it's a product of his experience and just game management. And Andy Reid does this also, is they don't try, it's going to sound silly, but it's like they don't try to win the game. They don't try to win every play, if that makes sense. I know the players are trying to win every play, but it feels like Spagnuolo is always saving a blitz for that right moment that he hasn't shown all season or all game. And that to me speaks to like some of the cliche stuff, like put some color to the cliche stuff about knowing how to win. It's about knowing when to take chances and knowing when it's that time when the game is in the balance, when you need to make that play. And I think that's sometimes that speaks to, it's not game planning as much as it's like game management. And that's the difference, I think, in sometimes these games with these really great teams. It's not that they had a better scheme or they had better plays, is that they called the right plays at the right time.
Game management, another reason why, to your point about defensive head coaches, Steve Spagnuolo, a guy finally getting some interviews this cycle after a long tenure of being one of the most effective postseason weapons there's been. Speaking of the Chiefs, though, Dominique, are you one of the people that's now sick of the Kansas City Chiefs? I feel like we've hit the 73-win Golden State Warriors moment where now everything, even the most likable players in the league do, seems to piss people off.
Yeah, I've pushed back on that a little bit because I enjoyed watching the Warriors when they added KD. I think I never watched more basketball than when LeBron went to Miami that year. That was fun. And I don't think that people turned on Jordan. I know people use that as an example, but maybe it was because I was a kid at the time. I wanted to see Jordan win, and it was in large part because it was fun. I do think that some of what the Chiefs are doing now is it's not as much fun. And so Patrick still does a dive and catch, but it's also, does a dive and throw, but it's also like, we remember what the Chiefs used to be. And that was awesome. And now they're winning in a different way. They're like, it's very, it's like it's draining the life out of the game, which is fine. I think if there weren't other stories that were as interesting, because that's what we're rooting for, is like, who do we want to be the protagonist of this season? Who is our hero? And it was fine if it was Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs going for a three-peat. If we didn't have the opportunity of Josh Allen might change this from the Patrick Mahomes era to the Mahomes versus Allen era, which is much more interesting and much more fun. If we didn't have waiting in the wings Jaden Daniels, the first rookie quarterback ever to take a team to and potentially win a Super Bowl and playing as well as he has, like those to me, I don't know if I can spin okay, here we go. For the Eagles, running backs are back. Like, I think that's less attractive of the other storylines, but all these storylines honestly are a little bit more exciting and more interesting than can the Chiefs claw and fight and hold it together and win one more chip to see something a three-peat that we've never seen before.
So we've eaten up just about the entire segment and we didn't get your winner. So quickly, who are your winners?
I said I picked the Chiefs on TV and then I picked the Bills on my podcast. But on the other game, Eagles, even though I live in DC, I think the Eagles are better and they're going to win. But I'd prefer Jaden to win, obviously.
The Stugotz is so strong in you. Check out the Dominique Foxworth show. Watch him all over ESPN doing a phenomenal job and figure out which team he is going to pick on the platform that you listen to. Dominique, always appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
Kansas City Bills, going to win it.
Coming up next, we'll take a look at some mock drafts. Hell yeah, brother. Next on GoJo and Golic. In the last segment here, something we talked about with him we hadn't yet got to really discuss on this show. We mentioned it a little bit off the top. But the Dallas Cowboys sort of flying under the radar right now as the reports again from Clarence Hill and others that they're expected to hire Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach as soon as probably today at some point, after a coaching cycle that saw everyone from Jason Witten, former Cowboys tight end name, to Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator with the Eagles. Deion Sanders was a fun news cycle for a couple of days to get everyone excited as both sides sort of played their part in that in a way that I never really thought was realistic. This does seem more in line, Dad, with who Jerry Jones is and what he seems to want out of this position here. Are you surprised at all that they went with a candidate with as little acclaim as Brian?
No, not at all, because the first box to check for Jerry Jones and hiring a new coach is, I still have control of the whole situation. He will not bring in a coach that's going to challenge him, right? I mean, Brian Schottenheimer was the OC under Mike McCarthy. Kellen Moore was the OC there. Those are two guys that will not challenge Jerry Jones. So that's priority number one for Jerry Jones, that he is running the show and he doesn't have a coach that's going to kick back against it. So, and unfortunately, that hasn't proven to be successful since Jimmy Johnson. I know Barry Switzer won in 96, but that was a lot with Jimmy Johnson's players. Jimmy Johnson basically made the decisions or was right in line and making just as many decisions as Jerry Jones. And we know for years Jerry Jones hated that. It took forever to put Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor, which was a joke because Jerry felt Jimmy was getting too much credit, which Jimmy deserved all the credit. But they didn't have a coach since that really challenged Jerry, or Jerry doesn't want to hire a coach that's going to challenge him. And that's what this will be. It'll be a coach that won't challenge him.
Yeah, it certainly seemed to be that way. Dominique, I know it was kind of said in jest about Jerry Jones being broke, but at least displaying broke behavior. But, Dad, when you look at the totality of the Cowboys, that's what this has been, right? You mentioned, yes, he eventually pays players, but it seems like he's taken a long time to get the funds together, or just hoping that he'll somehow be able to drive down the cost enough to make it easier for him. We've seen him go out and not spend in free agency the last couple of seasons, or really ever in his tenure there. And outside of the grand palace that is Jerry World, which is probably the first iteration of all these new NFL stadiums that we saw, it does not reek of someone who is going out here and willing to throw money at their problems the way, look at another sport like Steve Coen with the Mets, who came over and it's like, I'm rich as hell. I am going to spend until this team is good, and we're going to figure out the rest later. This is a decidedly different tact from Jerry Jones, who, once he's done distracting us with great appearances on Landman and this brief flirtation with Deion Sanders, goes right back to the same behavior that's had the Cowboys as a middling team more often than not during his tenure post Jimmy Johnson.
Listen, as a businessman, he is top notch. He has the Dallas Cowboys as the highest money-wise, the highest franchise out there in all of sports at about $10 billion. So you have to give him credit for that, for building that. But as far as the team is concerned, I mean, it rings so hollow when he says, I'm all in. You're not all in. You're not all in. You take forever to pay your guys, and you don't sign anybody in the offseason. So, I mean, it's like crying wolf. I'm all in. You're like, you roll your eyes and raise your eyebrows and say, oh, here he goes again, saying he's all in when he's not all in. Great businessman as far as the Dallas Cowboys as a franchise and the stadium worth $10 billion. But as far as the team and advancing and being a championship team and reliving his 3 Super Bowls that he has, not so much.
I'll always push back some on the businessman thing, because these assets appreciate at an unholy rate no matter what these teams seem to do. Like, I'm sorry, being an NFL owner, he deserves, honestly, the players deserve more credit. The Dallas Cowboys players from the 90s are the reason why they get called America's team and why they've done so well since then here. As far as NFL owners, there's a reason all these private equity and everyone wants to get in, because there's nothing you can do to bleep this up. You own an NFL team and you've got a one-way ticket to an appreciating asset the way that exists nowhere else. All these franchise valuations go up. All of these teams are worth billions of dollars. So yes, Jerry Jones has certainly continued to court interest around this team, but I always push back on this notion that he is some sort of superb businessman who has unlocked a key that no one else has. The Cowboys had ballers during the 90s, and they latched on to a bunch of fans that were team agnostic, and it's worked out for them.
I did not say he was the king of all unlocking it, but he is great at it. I don't care. You can sit there and say that all the NFL teams appreciate, but the Dallas Cowboys are number one in the world overall. Soccer teams, baseball teams, basketball teams, they are number one. So you have to give him credit for that.
I will give him some credit, but I will also always lean towards the players who have made that franchise so great and say that probably has a whole hell of a lot to do with it here. Jerry Jones is great at getting himself attention. He's awesome at that.
You want to say that the Cowboys have had the most great players of all time? I don't think so. They've had great players. Other teams have had great players throughout the years, and they're not worth as much as the Cowboys. So, I mean, you could say the same thing about other teams that had great Hall of Famers walk through, but their valuation isn't what the Cowboys' valuation is. I mean, we're bickering about something here that doesn't really matter, because what really matters is about what goes on the field. And what he says about what he wants and what he does to kind of get to that point are two different things.
Yeah, I like pushing back because I'm a bit of an anarchist. Shout out to Mina Kimes, the original author of that claim that Jerry Jones more adept at acquiring attention for himself than that, and allowing me to yell it loudly here. Credit to my sources on this one here. Speaking of people talking about the direction of their franchise, though, Jesse, let's get to that with the Tennessee Titans. I feel like their GM search and a lot of the things around this organization, something we have not talked a lot about this week yet, and we have heard from the people involved here as they now sit with the number one pick and control the key to everyone else.
Yeah, right? They're on the clock, or so we think. Take a listen to this.
The one thing I will say, if there's a generational talent, you don't pass that up. You can't pass that up. And if we feel that there's a generational talent right there, what we call a blue player, a guy that is a franchise-type player, the player that tips the field in your favor every time they step on the field, like you cannot pass that up. But we'll also look at all the options, not only at the number one overall pick, but in all the rounds. I mean, we got to see what the value is. We got to see what's on the table. We got to, do what's best for the Tennessee Titans.
Okay, so guys, what do you make of the Titans president of football operations talking about the pick? It sounds like they don't really know what they want to do at one. They're leaving their options open here.
Well, first off, shout out to our friend Ramon Foster over at Ramon, Kayla, and Will on 104.5 The Zone in Nashville, getting that interview with Chad Brinker from the Tennessee Titans. But, Dad, that's by design. Smart business to make sure all options look open for business when you hold the number one pick.
Absolutely right. You make every single option look open. He has said draft picks are our biggest form of currency. So, to me, and you heard him say, if there's a generational player, you take him. There's not a generational quarterback in this class, right? Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders are not generational quarterbacks. Now, again, that's based on what we see in potential. We have seen, obviously, fourth-rounders, sixth-rounders, Tom Brady turn into the GOAT. We've seen Kurt Warner not be drafted, be a Hall of Famer. You never know. But you go on your evaluation, and there's not a blue chipper a quarterback in this evaluation. There's not a generational player, his words, not mine, a blue player, a quarterback in this draft. So in my eyes, I think they trade back. I think they accumulate draft picks. I think they live with Will Levis. Will Levis is going into his third year. He's still on a rookie wage scale. Maybe you pick up a veteran in the offseason, but I don't see if he, now again, you don't believe everything you hear before a draft. But if you truly are saying you don't pass up a generational player, well, there ain't no generational quarterback in this draft. So I don't know if they want to make their first pick a quarterback that they don't think is generational.
I don't think you can put Will Levis back out there as the starter next season after what we saw this year. And especially if you're Brian Callahan, who's trying to go out here and prove that you should continue to be the head coach. I know organizations and fans like to talk about the idea of, well, let's just be bad and accumulate that for next year. We see plenty of coaches not survive that. And so if you're Brian Callahan, I'm sure you would like to get your quarterback of the future on their roster. Dad, there is absolutely something too. If you truly believe none of these guys are worth the price of a number one pick, hey, you could say it's smart business to try and pick up one of the veterans this offseason here, whether it's Kirk Cousins or any number of guys that could be available, and say, we'll go through, we'll try and make it work with this in the interim at a better, more affordable price for us, and we'll wait and hold our assets for the future. That sounds great in theory, but once you put that into practice, it's pretty hard to go and sell to your fan base and everybody else that we're serious about trying to build something here. When you've got the number one pick, you've got the chance to go and get a guy at a position of need for you, and quarterback is a massive position of need for the Tennessee Titans, and say, we get our pick of the guy, and we're not going to take him. Like, generational talent, Dad, I don't know if he's talking about Travis Travis Hunter, who obviously could fit that billing in certain ways. Abdul Carter is going to be probably Mel Kiper Jr. just put out his first mock draft of 2025, and he had the picks go Cam Ward number 1, Travis Hunter number 2, Shedeur Sanders number 3 to the Giants, and then Abdul Carter number 4. So if you're looking at the guys who might fit that billing, Dad, we got to see Abdul Carter up close and personal in that Notre Dame Penn State game, play with basically one arm and still dominate. That might be a guy, him and Travis Hunter, maybe closer to that billing than certainly either of the quarterbacks talked about at the top of this draft.
Oh, I would definitely agree. That put Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter as far as generational talent. I would completely agree. So, again, we know from now to the draft, you'll hear all kinds of different talk that you just don't believe. At the end of the day, do I think Tennessee will take a quarterback? Probably will. Probably will, unless they could find a bridge free agent in the offseason and try and build that team through picking up more draft picks or taking truly a generational person like a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter. So, but again, it's lying season, right? Starting now for any team that's not still in the playoffs, talking about the draft, it's lying season and just trying to put your team, which is exactly what you should do, try and put your team in the best position to get the best pick possible.
Yeah, I think this is most interesting for the New York Giants, who are also in this position where, hey, these are two if you look now, the Cleveland Browns, another really interesting one in this at number 2. Mel Kiper mocking them with Travis Hunter. But, Dad, we know in addition to Deshaun Watson being objectively terrible since he's returned, and that's just the on-the-field portion of that conversation, he's also dealing with another Achilles injury this offseason. Like, that guy should already have played his last snaps for the Cleveland Browns, but I think that injury almost surely eliminates that. And so now if you're Kevin Stefanski, who, they announced at the press conference the other day when Tommy Rees is hired as the offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski's taken back to play calling duties. And while we knew he wasn't actually going to get fired, Dad, I'm sure for some people, despite the fact that he won Coach of the Year last year, the seat might be warming up a little bit. And usually when a head coach that's an offensive play caller takes back those duties, it's somewhat of an indication that if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out on my terms, not y'all's terms. And so I think they're an interesting wild card sitting there at number 2 of, do we go 1 and 2 off the board with these two quarterback prospects, even acknowledging that they're imperfect? I would probably lean towards yes on that, knowing how thirsty teams are for this. I think the Titans are going to take a quarterback at 1, and I'd be stunned at this point if the Browns didn't at 2.
Yeah, knowing what happened with Deshaun Watson, I would agree with you, which would leave the Giants out at number 3 unless they're willing to try and give up a king's ransom to move up, and maybe one of the teams will kind of bid it that way to make and give up the spot, to give up the quarterback, because this is a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot every year with the quarterbacks, right? There's nothing guaranteed. But this year, I mean, again, there's only 2 that are really first round worthy, which means probably 3 or 4 will go in the first round because of the overvaluation of quarterbacks. But it will be interesting, the jockeying position at the top. But I do agree. I do think the end of the day, the top 2 picks will be quarterbacks.
And again, flawed prospects, Cam Ward, everything we've said about Caleb Williams last year, true on steroids for Cam Ward in terms of holding onto the ball. Shedeur Sanders, not the most impressive physical traits, but a guy who did a lot behind an
The all-star starters for the big weekend. Anybody shocked or surprised with the results? Any snubs in your opinion, fellas?
Well, I think there's some that, especially among the all-star starters, people have pointed out here. LaMelo Ball not getting the nod in the Eastern Conference. Victor Wembanyama, still the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year, getting snubbed by the West. But, Dad, we know the All-Star Weekend for the NBA kind of in an interesting spot in terms of attention, the fan vote element of all of this. And so having LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Steph still represented in this as all players over the age of 35, and the ones who we know hit the nostalgia button for people, certainly drive eyeballs, have the respect of these Hall of Fame careers. I can't act surprised in a year where they were the heroes on the Olympic team that all of a sudden these guys, who are still all playing pretty well for the most part, get the nod based on the benefit of being the faces of the league for so long.
Yeah, listen, this is an entertainment weekend thing. So I have given up of the chastising any all-star voting of players that don't deserve to be there over players that do deserve to be there. It's an entertainment weekend. It's for the fans. So I get it. Wemby, though, is obviously someone that everybody thinks will be a perennial, and he's going to make the reserve squad. The reserves haven't been announced yet, but he'll make the reserve squad for sure. as will Ball in the Eastern Conference. And those guys will get their chances as starters. But especially in the West, people are trying to hang on to the Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James as long as they can, right? We saw the Olympics where they starred in the Olympics, and there was that prideful, like, yeah, they still have it. And as you mentioned, they're all still playing pretty well. Durant's going through, some injury things. But it's just they're going to get their due until they're out of the league, and I get it because it's for the fans.
Kevin Durant joins Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and Shaq with 15 All-Star appearances overall. He trails only LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the late Kobe Bryant for the most in NBA history. So these guys are fixtures around that weekend. I get it, and it's a weekend, Dad, that the NBA is trying to zhuzh up with a new format this season and try and see if they can make the All-Star game something attainable for people again. Something interesting that I thought in terms of the NBA trying to make this an entertainment product was an offer that got turned down. Apparently, according to Chris Haynes, LeBron James and Bronny were approached about competing in the skills challenge together, obviously becoming the first father-son duo to compete in that. And Bronny had also received an invite to be one of the G League players that competed in the Rising Stars Challenge. They turned down both invites, Dad. Are you surprised at all by that?
No, I think, and I don't know whose idea it was to turn it down, whether LeBron, who basically hasn't done anything on Saturday in the All-Star game in forever. But I think if it was with his son, he would obviously do it. But I think it was either a collective decision, Bronny decision, maybe a Savannah decision. I don't know. That just said, why bring more onto this? There were already enough critics out there that had them playing in their first game together, of which I was not one. I think it was absolutely an awesome thing to have father and son share the court. But he's a G League player right now, and he's trying to get his feet under him. He's trying to get some experience playing and to kind of be put out there as a show. Now, would it have drawn fans? Would it have drawn attention? Both positively it would have, and negatively it would have. And I just think they don't need it. I think Bronny would like to just kind of grow as a player, more behind the scenes. When you're the son of LeBron James and you play a sport, especially the same sport LeBron plays, you're going to be out there. You know that. You know you're going to be talked about. This may be just a little too quick. I get the league trying to capitalize on the entertainment value of it since it's never been done, a father-son thing before. But I completely understand them saying, no, we don't really need this in where Bronny is at right now.
Yeah, again, I'm sure for a guy who's had attention on him and eyes on him his whole life, there is part of him now that they've hit this where, listen, we've seen Bronny get some garbage time minutes at the end of games and stuff, but you mentioned he is a development player at this point in time, and so having to go and have all of this attention on you when maybe he does just want to go and put in the work right now and be able to try and give himself the best opportunity to be an NBA player possible. There would be no fault in that. And again, a guy who has grown up with the circus around him his entire life because of the accomplishment of his dad, maybe wanting to prioritize his career in the long run here. Maybe LeBron, it is just as simple as LeBron doesn't like to do Saturday stuff at the All-Star game, but either way, Dad, I think that certainly would have been a draw to the All-Star game here. And anything with LeBron James is always going to drive attention. But in general, like we saw the Sabrina Ionescu Steph Curry 3-point challenge was certainly something that drew interest from a lot of people. I know Caitlin Clark turned down the invitation to come and be a part of that, I believe, in the same way, correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
So you're looking for ways to kind of put lipstick on a situation that with the NBA All-Star game, like, I don't know, with the format change, was that something that you bought into when it comes and pertains to this game? How did you feel about that?
I don't know. Again, for those that don't know, there's going to be 4 teams. There's the between the 24 All-Stars, they'll make up 3 teams of 8 players each. And then there's the Rising Star game, and the winner of that game will be the 4th team, and there'll be a mini tournament for the NBA All-Star Game instead of just that game, which I never watch. I always watch Saturday night. I enjoy the entertainment of the three-point, the skills, the slam dunk contest. I never watch the game. Just like I haven't watched the Pro Bowl in God knows how many years either. I would occasionally, channel surf past the actual All-Star games themselves. So I give them credit for trying. Just like the NFL went to a flag football game, the NBA is going to a 4-team mini tournament. I have no idea how it's going to work out. I have no idea if it's going to make the players play harder. I don't know, but I give them credit for trying something because Adam Silver was just disgusted giving out the trophy last year, and you knew there had to be some kind of a change going on. So we'll see how it plays out. It still all depends on how the players approach the game.
I get the NBA feeling compelled to do this. Like, once you get chirped by Barack Obama, that's a hard thing to come back from in terms of your all-star product. But with a lot of these leagues, Dad, I do feel like there is some semblance of overcooking this. You're right. You can only do so much to incentivize the players to care, but trying to change all these rules, like, I don't even know what to make of the dunk contest anymore with some of the changes they make to that. MLB's All-Star Game, the Home Run Derby is kind of the same way. Every year I feel like we're trotting out a new format, and I never fully know what's going on. But if we get a bunch of guys to crush dingers, it doesn't really matter. If we get performances like we have the last couple of years, it can be entertaining. I think overall, like, we're trying to hold on to something that's really not all of that important anymore. Like, yeah, it matters for the fans in these cities who still at times don't have the ability to see all their favorite players, but national television packages, the way that these games have evolved and grown as TV products sort of eliminates the need for all-star games to be as important as they once were. And so I don't know. For the NBA, I get it because this does, like, the voting for this, for all NBA, like the stuff and the accolades that pile up here that we say don't matter, we know in the all NBA sense can have an effect on guys' contracts and earnings in the future. But as far as the All-Star weekends as entertainment products, they're still going to rate better than most things because it's sports. But at the end of the day, I don't think these are things that leagues really need to break their backs to try and continue to make relevant. I think they're overestimating that importance.
And the lack of hitting in the NFL Pro Bowl is not just a new thing. I go back to it because Brian Schottenheimer is in the news. His dad, Marty Schottenheimer, who coached during my era, God rest his soul, was a tough coach. And I remember Bruce Smith, who came out in the same draft that I did, was the number one pick in 1985. He made, obviously, a ton of Pro Bowls. And Marty Schottenheimer was the coach one year for the Pro Bowl. And Marty Schottenheimer, during practice of the Pro Bowl, wanted the Pro Bowl players in full pads for a Pro Bowl practice, and Bruce Smith led the revolt. He actually got the players to go in the team bus to go to practice and not bring their pads. Like, what was Marty going to do if we all showed up in no pads and didn't want to hit? So, yeah, Bruce Smith led a revolt of not hitting at a full padded Pro Bowl practice that Marty Schottenheimer wanted. So, again, the lack of hitting has been going on for a while in the Pro Bowl, including practice.
Quick stories to send you into the weekend. Download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Watch us live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network. If you must miss us or any of our great guests, shout out to Dominique Foxworth, ESPN NFL analyst and host of the Dominique Foxworth Show, wherever you get your podcast. He joined us off the top of the second hour. You can catch that interview wherever you get your podcast or right here on the GoJo Golic YouTube channel as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's finish off the week with this, that, and the third. And let's start with this. God, this headline is freaking weird. Anti-aging fanatic Brian Johnson slammed for gross post tracking son's erection data here. Jesse, you lobbed this one in our lap, much like the cup of coffee that got lobbed in your lap this morning. I have avoided anything about this Brian Johnson character because he looks disturbing to me. He looks like one of the elves from the Lord of the Ring trilogy, which makes sense considering that's essentially what he's trying to mimic here. So what the hell is going on here?
So he's trying to reverse the aging process. So his whole thing is that he's biologically, 47 or whatever, but he's trying to reverse age his internal organs to 18. And he's doing it through a series of unconventional methods, including swapping blood with his son through plasma transfers, all this weird stuff. And so it's not like he's a stranger to crossing the line, but this one is really taking the internet by storm. So he tweeted this out. So apparently every night when he goes to sleep, he and his his son hook themselves up to a machine that tracks their erection data. And he was quick to point out, Brian was quick to point out that his son's erection data shows that he's 2 minutes longer on the erections than Brian is. So I'm guessing they're going to use this data so Brian can get those numbers up. So that's what
those are rookie numbers. You got to get those numbers up. I will say, like, that is a proxy for how well your blood is flowing, and there are actually like health and wellness reasons why that is something that people have measured before. I'm not all that unfamiliar with the concept, but as is often been the case, white people share way too much online. Like, we really do, as a group, just give way too much weird ass information about ourselves. And I gotta put my hand up. Like, I am one that does that. Obviously, not in this way with the weird, erection stuff. But Dad, this is just another symptom of the root cause of white people being weird as hell on the internet.
I'm unfamiliar with this train of thought. You said you've seen this data before. I have never heard of this in my life. Tracking your erections during sleep.
Yeah.
I mean,
hey, we got a father-son duo here. If you guys want to start tracking,
and the picture they took together is creepy with his son Talmadge. It's just creepy.
It gets
the whole thing creeps me out.
He was originally a Mormon, and then he left the Mormon church, and now he's an anti-aging freak. He sold his company for like $400 million. So this is just his whole life. It's pretty crazy. Go down the rabbit hole, Senior, and just read about him because it's it's just interesting.
No, I will not. Jesse, you know me. I am an inch deep and a mile wide. I will dig no further into this than this article that I'm reading in disbelief. The data posted included the number of erections, average duration, average quality, and overall sleep efficiency. My God.
Quality.
I mean, what the hell are we doing? I'm going to get up in the morning and see how my night erections are monitored?
I mean,
what are we doing?
It's 2025, baby. Let's go.
I feel like the quality is for someone else to determine, but maybe that's just me. What I appreciate is in the extensive daily ritual, they wake up at 5, have a 1-hour exercise regime, and 4 to 5 hours of concentrated thought. I can't imagine anything that my dad would hate more than 4 to 5 hours of him having to concentrate on one thing that's not his iPad and the latest season of Hell on Wheels.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, that's why one of the reasons I never got into yoga. I can't concentrate that long. I just can't. 4 to 5 hours. I couldn't go 4 to 5 minutes of concentrating on one thing.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem with these Gen Xers. They're always on their phones and their attention spans have gone to hell. So I try and tell people, my dad, the poster child for it, letting the internet ruin his brain. It's sad what you've become.
Yeah. Senior's just
I don't know what to do with this story.
Yeah.
You know what we'll do? We'll move on to that, Jesse, and let's get back to sports and James Harden being a sportsman, if anyone still cares.
Yeah, so he made history. He became 8th on the all-time triple doubles list. So you can see the list here. He is among some great names. Great company. He's also top 3 in all-time made threes, for the record, guys. So pretty cool accomplishment for James Harden here.
So listen, you have to wonder: do night erections help him in this?
Senior, that's a good question. That's a good question.
Is he monitoring them? Is it helping him? Does that help him put him 8th on the list?
We should
reach out. Now I wonder if I haven't been doing things correctly. If I should have been monitoring this stuff.
Apparently.
Dad is about to walk into the Exos facility that he works out at in Scottsdale and ask some really uncomfortable questions to a staff that I don't know if is prepared for the source.
Yeah.
I'm about to walk into the house after the show and get a stern look from your mother, is what I'm about to do.
Yes.
I don't know.
We're about to get an email from DraftKings for the amount of time we've said erection in a 10-minute segment here to end the show, which is going to be incredible. Are triple doubles impressive to people still? Like, do people actually care at this point? I know we went through this where Russell Westbrook got so many of them, and his MVP candidacy and so much of his viability seemed to surround this stat that used to be novel and now feels a lot more commonplace. Well, and listen, it's a credit to the players we have. I mean, Nikola Jokic is already third on the list of NBA regular season triple-double holders behind Oscar Robertson and Russell Westbrook. I just wonder if it, like, when people hear that stat now, if they are as impressed as they used to be, because I know I'm not.
Well, I mean, before Westbrook, it was Oscar Robertson who held the record for forever, right? Of averaging a season of triple-doubles, the most triple-doubles, and Westbrook, averaged it and passed Oscar. So in this day and age of three-point shooting, I still think it is kind of impressive. But in the top 10, you have Westbrook, you have one, Jokic is current, LeBron is current, Doncic is current, Harden is current, and Sabonis is current. So, I mean, you have half of this list is current players just moving up the list.
I was going to say, Luka Doncic is probably going to be top 5 in this list before it's all said and done, if not better. Nikola Jokic is probably going to pass Oscar Robertson before he's all said and done. Like, it just does seem the modern game is going to completely eradicate what that used to mean to people in the process. Speaking of things that used to mean something, Jesse, let's get to the third, that a name really didn't get a long shelf life to be loved by the public out in Utah.
Yeah, so the Utah Hockey Club is having issues getting the trademark for its preferred permanent name, Yetis or Yeti, and unfortunately running into some issues here because Yeti is already a pretty big brand, the water bottles, Yeti. So they're having some issues. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office refused their trademark application for Utah Yetis. So, Gojo, I know you're not mad about this because you want them to stay the Utah Hockey Club.
It's a great name, just like the Washington football team was a better name than the Commanders. It'd be so sick if Jaden Daniels was quarterbacking the Washington football team, getting ready to try and win the NFC East title in the NFC East title in the same matchup here. But instead, we got robbed of that for a bad name by an owner that no longer works for that team. I saw PFT commenter talking about that today. So, Dad, embrace the greatness and the clean logo that can be the Utah Hockey Club.
I do like the Utah Hockey Club. I mean, it's not like you can't put it on a shirt and sell it as memorabilia. You can basically sell anything. And I'm fine with that now because I wanted the Yeti. I thought the Yeti was the only name for Utah, and I get it. Yeti is a pretty big brand name out there, so I understand it's too close to that. So I would be all for staying with the Hockey Club and putting that on memorabilia and selling the hell out of it.
Crack